That's a strange passage we just heard for a variety of reasons. It reflects a very different world than the world that we live in today. So many ways. The ancient world, by all historians' accounts, was a bloody and a brutal place. An eye for an eye was mostly the law of the land everywhere. And so if you hurt someone, you just assumed you would get hurt back, often worse. If you took from someone, they took from you. If you killed someone, someone from their family was going to kill you. And that was in the most restrained response and reaction and vengeance. Often, the response might be kill you and your family, as anger tends to spiral out of control. Deuteronomy 19 and Numbers 35 are two different places where Moses has already given the people these instructions, and now Joshua and the people are just putting them into practice. And Deuteronomy 19 describes a normal, accidental way that you might kill someone. Someone goes into the forest with his neighbor to cut wood. We should just sub in Alex's name here. He is the most likely to have this happen to him. And his hand swings the axe to cut down a tree, and the head slips from the handle and strikes his neighbor so that he dies. Usually Alex injures himself, but he does like to bring others with him into dangerous situations. The book of Numbers adds a few more accidental ways to kill someone. If he pushed him suddenly without enmity, anger, animosity, or hurled anything on him without lying in wait, or used a stone that could cause death and without seeing him dropped it on him so that he died, though he was not his enemy and did not seek his harm. Again, these would qualify as accidental killings. But what is absolutely abundantly clear throughout the scripture is this universal truth, which is to take another person's life was a serious offense. Whether you did it on purpose or on accident, and no matter who the person was. And as you can see from these passages, Moses imagined a number of ways that you might accidentally kill a person. You might also immediately think of some easy accidental ways that somebody could be killed. We live in a dangerous world. And human beings are this insane tension between really tough and resilient and overcome incredible pain and obstacles. And at the same time, we are shockingly fragile. And it actually doesn't take that much to end our existence. Those are somehow both true at the same time. And in the ancient world, it didn't matter why you killed someone. If you killed another person, you were guilty and you had to pay. Now, as you heard this morning's passage, as you've heard me talking about killing someone accidentally, I can't imagine that there are very many of us in the room right now sweating. Right? I don't see anybody squirming in their seats, mostly just thinking, with intrigued faces. Because, let's look around. This isn't really a murderous looking bunch, right? You just don't really give off strong killer vibes, even the accidental type, except for maybe Alex. And so, right, what in the world does this 9-verse chapter near the end of Joshua, this passage about accidental killers having a place to escape, escape to? Like, how is this scripture for us? How is this good and profitable for us who want to be people equipped to live for God and serve him? What does it mean for us as 21st century followers of Jesus? One of the starting places for us is to just take a step back and to consider when we might have been guilty of something, right? Guilty of anything. And we were facing a real consequence because of our guilt. And I'm not just talking about guilty of like just anything, but right, something you didn't mean to do. You did something you didn't mean to, now you're guilty of it and you're facing a consequence. Charlie's pointing out a time when Tina has done that. Nice. Afterwards, I'll allow testimonies. I remember a time back in 2008, I got to travel to Israel and Palestine. I got to go to the Sea of Galilee. And there was a group of us, and we jumped into the Sea of Galilee together, and we were swimming around, and it was fantastic. And yeah, a bunch of us jumped off of this. I've got pictures of all of us going one after the other, and then there's pictures of us swimming. And it wasn't until we got back and developed these photos that we realized we were busy breaking the law that said swimming prohibited. And apparently there were pretty severe fines. We didn't mean to break the law, but we did. Like, we were guilty. Thankfully, we didn't face any of the consequences. It's always awkward when you face consequences in a place where you don't live, where you're not a citizen. It's hard and it's scary. But for the rest of us, what do we do when we've maybe offended someone accidentally? What do you do when you have broken a law unintentionally, committed a crime, when you have done wrong, but it was truly an accident? Where do you turn? What are your options? As we think about the story we just read, I want you to notice what God does as he sets up his new people in their new lives, in their new homes. God doesn't tell them, okay, the first thing I want you to do is I want you to build a big temple for me. He doesn't have them gather an army for their protection. He doesn't give them instructions about how to build and generate an economy. None of that is his first priority. God, as the king of his people, gives his first administrative decree, and it is to create a city of refuge. A place whose primary function is to protect a person who has made a mistake. A person who accidentally killed someone else. I mean, think about what God has done here. God has brought his people over a lot of years into a paradise. He is settling them there. But God knows that they're going to make mistakes here. He knows that to be human is to mess up on accident a lot. and so God, in his grace, in his foresight, he orders their lives in such a way that there is a remedy available. And he does this ahead of time. God is the first civil engineer who engineers a solution to this mistake problem in advance. And he does it by identifying 6 cities. And if you look at a map, you can see that they are scattered throughout the land on purpose so that they are close by for anyone who needs access to them. Accessibility is key for these cities. Like, proximity is the heart of this engineering solution. These cities, they need to be close because, as you may imagine, right? If you kill a person, you are in grave danger in the ancient world. Our passage describes the avenger of blood. This could be anyone, any group of family members who see it as their job now to make you pay, and they're coming after you, right? The avenger of blood is the one who would come hunting for you to take your life as payment for the person you killed, their family member. And think about how quickly we get angry and upset, and hatred takes hold of our lives. You've probably read stories or watched movies of blood feuds. You killed ours and now we kill yours, and it happens fast and it spirals before anyone is thinking about it. None of it happens at a thinking level. It happens in a reactive way. That is the culture that these words are coming into. You've taken a life, and so you better escape. And so the city of refuge is designed to be nearby and accessible. And I wonder also if we can just call the city of refuge what it is. Morally ambiguous. And maybe even uncomfortable. It is genuinely complicated because it's clear that any death of a human caused by the hand of another human pollutes the land, corrupts the world, is bad. It's against God's design. Even if you kill someone on accident, it's not as though you go, oh, well, it was just an accident. It doesn't matter. No, it absolutely matters. According to God, you are guilty of taking a life that only God has the right to take. The city of refuge, then, if you hear it, isn't for the innocent, right? It is a place for people with bloody hands, messy situations, people who need time and safety before everything else is worked out. What a gift from God this is. To have a way to let everyone cool down a bit. Right? I mean, we all know the experience of being angry and being ready to fire off an email. And then when we sit on it and we don't send it off right away and we come back to it a couple days later, we're like, whoa, that was really harsh. I'm really glad I didn't send that. Because now we have a cooler head. God creates a way for the intensity of the moment to drop a bit, for everyone to have a chance to breathe and take a bit and trust that He is at work. And so, let's think about, like, how does the city of refuge work? It's pretty straightforward, right? An accidental killer, the manslayer, it's a funny phrase, but some translations capture it, comes to the city gate. And there they state their case to the elders of the city. And the elders meet this person at the gate, and they receive them, and they receive their story. And then, it struck me, the CEB, the translation we just heard, says it. They welcome the killer into their city to live among them. They live inside the city among the people until a fair trial can be conducted. We are a people who are used to jails being the place where you put somebody who is awaiting trial. We like the idea of putting somebody away who could be dangerous to us. But here they are living in the city. But what's really interesting, it's not the physical walls of the city. It's not like the land is somehow special where the city is that like protects this killer. It's the community, the people. The city of refuge is a city made up of priests. Priests who live in this city and whose purpose it is to welcome and to protect those who need it. And it's their job to protect those who need it at the time that they need it the most. A killer is welcomed. And they're welcomed before. It is proven. Whether the death he caused was on purpose or on accident. We know the person's a killer. We just don't know whether it was on purpose or not. It reminds me of the stories I hear friends who have spent years in Alcoholics Anonymous or other like 12-step programs where you walk into one of these groups and the welcome happens immediately. Nobody's asking you questions about the terrible things you've done or what brought you to the meeting. You just assume that everybody's here for the same reason. We all have stuff, but you're just brought in and you belong to us, and we're glad that you're here. The city of Refuge is the people who welcome the guilty and make a home for them while God works out their future. There's a line in the New Testament, in the book of Hebrews, that is reflecting on God's promises, that makes a reference to the city of Refuge. And we hear it in Hebrews chapter 6. The author says, when God desired to show more convincingly to the heirs of the promise, his people, the unchangeable character of his purpose, he guaranteed with an oath, so that by two unchangeable things in which it is impossible for God to lie, we who have fled for refuge might have strong encouragement to hold fast to the hope set before us. Goes on to describe having fled to Christ for refuge. The author of the book of Hebrews sees this continuity between the cities of refuge and what they did and Jesus and what he is doing. What the cities provided the guilty, Jesus now provides in his own life. God cannot lie, we're told. His character does not change. He has made a promise. Just as a killer was secure in a city of refuge, so now we who have been guilty of sin are secure in Jesus. We have been welcomed. Jesus is our refuge, accessible and close and unafraid of our guilt. And it's worth saying, the cities of refuge, they didn't erase guilt or consequences. The very end of our passage that we just heard read, there is still a trial to be had. There might still be accountability of some kind. And no matter what, the killer would be forced to stay in the city of refuge for a long time. And so what we find is that grace isn't the absence of truth. Grace provides safety while the truth gets sorted out. And this feels really necessary in our world right now, right? Where the truth of an event might be very unclear at first. The fog of war settles in and we're not exactly sure what happened, but how quickly all of us, right, are absolutely certain that we understand who is at fault in this event and what the consequences should be. Right? Because maybe we've seen a video clip online or we've read about an event in the paper, and immediately everyone automatically believes they know the truth of the matter. And so we're fired up, and we're angry, and we're ready to act, and we're grabbing our people, and we're ready to go. But truth takes time. It takes time to gather the evidence. It takes time to weigh it. And grace is necessary while the truth is sought. And while we wait for God to fulfill his promises, while we wait for the truth to be known and revealed and understood, Jesus remains our city of refuge, secure and trustworthy. Unfortunately, sometimes in this life, with our limited understanding, we might never know what is true. What is true about any particular event or killing. The painful reality is that a city of refuge can be taken advantage of. A man who murdered someone in cold blood could have fled to a city of refuge and claimed to have killed on accident. And come trial time, without two witnesses to prove that the man had murdered someone on purpose, the murderer could not be convicted. And there, the guilty man would live safe in the city of refuge for a long time. And in our guts, we feel uncomfortable with that. That's unjust. That person deserves whatever we think they might deserve. God knows that his grace can be taken advantage of. God's people have always had to trust that our ability to know the truth and get justice in this life are limited. That God, we trust that God will ultimately make all things right. But that's a promise that will be fulfilled in time, sometimes a lot of time. And in that time, the guilty will go unpunished. And this reminds me of what Jesus says about weeds growing up with the wheat. In Matthew 13, Jesus tells a parable about the kingdom of heaven, where he describes a man who is sowing good seed in his field, but while he's sleeping, an enemy sneaks in and he sows weeds among the wheat. But as the weeds and the wheat, they grow up together, Jesus says it's not obvious which one is which. And so you can't pull the weeds without impacting the wheat. And so the man just says, let both grow together until the harvest. And in that statement, Jesus challenges us to trust the Lord of the harvest with what we don't have access to. To trust that if we can't tell the difference, it's okay because God can. And in the end, he will do what is right and good. And so there will be people who seek refuge with Jesus, who don't actually want the grace that he's offering. They just want to avoid their consequences. And so they will hide with Jesus. They will hide among Jesus's people. They will take advantage of the refuge that Jesus offers. And Jesus tells us that this will happen, not so that we suspiciously look around and go, ooh, who is it? That's not the way that we're called to live. It's ultimately not our job to figure out who is who. But instead, we are called to be the people who continue to provide welcome for the killer. Who called to be people who provide welcome and refuge for the guilty who come seeking it. Jesus today continues to be present. It continues to be close through us. We're told that where two or more are gathered in my name, there I am. There, the guilty can find refuge. In the same way that God engineered accessibility and proximity into the life of his people, that's what we as a church have been trying to live out, right? When we say that we imagine a future where two or more Christians connect daily in their neighborhoods to pray together, to care for each other, to grow spiritually, to engage in God's mission. And when we imagine that happening in every single neighborhood, the reason we say that is that we believe that Jesus wants us to be present and accessible, a present and accessible city of refuge in every neighborhood. And that rather than making people come and find us in our church buildings, wherever they might be, like what if we just made the presence of Jesus even more local and more accessible than people could even imagine? What if people who think, man, to deal with this stuff that I've got going on in my life, I have to somehow go walk into a church. I haven't been to a church in 30 years, 40 years, 50. They sit there wondering, do I have to go there? And all of a sudden they lift up their eyes and they find that they are so close to Jesus because a city of refuge, 2 or more followers of Jesus are right there ready to welcome them and tell them that they are loved by God. What if people, our neighbors who are seeking refuge, what if they don't have to look very far, but they just had to look up? If they saw in us and in our life together a safe place where their guilt and their brokenness and their pain and their grief can be held and can be dealt with. Are we close enough, daily enough, ordinary enough, that living in the midst of people's everyday lives that they can actually find refuge in Jesus with us? I wonder, do your neighbors know that they have somewhere close, somewhere nearby to run to, someone to run to? Something to consider for yourself. Are you able to hear the heavy, honest confession of someone who has made real mistakes? Or do you flinch or cringe or wince or recoil with judgment? Can you sit with someone in their mistakes, patiently, present, not anxiously, with grace and with kindness? Can you hold an ugly confession in such a way that someone confessing to you feels safe with you, even if in your heart you despise what they have done? If someone comes knocking at your door, what comes first? What do you want? What happened? Or come on in? I recently, I guess it was in the last couple of years, heard a story of a Christian family who befriended the weirdo next door. Solitary neighbor, didn't take care of his house, everything was overgrown, barely came out, had this nasty dog. All of the neighbors avoided that house, did everything they could to stay away. But this family would knock on the door with gifts. This family would invite him over. They would pray for him, ask him if they could pray for him. Over time, an equally strange, quirky, unkind or unfriendly woman moved in, and they just added her to their regular acts of connection and care. They would occasionally be with neighbors who would say, "Why do you spend all that time on them? They're terrible. They're the worst. It's obvious that something's going on over there," right? The neighbor was filled with whispers, and because God loves them, because we're sure they have a story. I don't know. We just want to get to know them. We want to show them that they're loved. And this went on for some time. And one day, this family drives home into their neighborhood, and it had to have been every single police car in the city is surrounding the house. SWAT is there. The garage door's open, and he's being walked out in handcuffs. The two had been busted for making drugs in the house. The house had been a place where they were just making drugs and selling them. For the next weeks and months, the neighbors were all angry at this family. "We told you they were terrible. We told you they were the worst. You didn't believe us." Both went to jail, convicted, found themselves in prison for extended periods. And the family faced a decision. Would they continue to be a safe place for those two people who were guilty of real crimes? Because it was easier when it was just like, well, yeah, they're probably bad, but now we know they're bad. Now they're in prison. Over the next several years, the husband visited the guy. The wife wrote letters to the woman. She was too far away. They would send gifts on holidays and birthdays. It would continue from a distance and as close as they could to be a safe place for them. And over time, each of them came to know how deeply loved they are by God. Found themselves compelled by the God who would send this ordinary family into their lives to create a safe space where the guilty could still be loved. What would it look like for us to become come on in people, giving people access to Jesus in our lives, providing them a place of refuge? Our passage this morning introduces us to the avenger of blood, the one who comes to take blood when you have taken it. This morning we hear the invitation. We experience the welcome of the shedder of blood, the shedder of his own blood, the one who comes to guilty people and says, I am giving my life for you. We come to the table together this morning to remember that this is what God is like. He has always been offering the welcome to us as guilty people, and it hasn't stopped. But through his Son, we have seen just how far he is willing to go to convince us that we are loved and welcome.